Hi, and welcome to Animalia, the podcast. I'm Natasha. Thank you so much for tuning in. On this episode of Animalia, I speak with not one, not two, but three veterinarians at the same time. Yes, this is a first for Animalia, and I'm so glad we can make it happen. These vets are talking about the application of ageism and sexism in their work environments, which, among other things, contribute to fatigue and general discontent. But I think talking through the issues did help, and you get to hear this very interesting conversation. So please welcome to Animalia Dr. Sherelle Sami, Dr. Maurice Frank, and Dr. Laurel Shand. I want to welcome three veterinarians to Animalia. Today we are doing a bit of a roundtable discussion with these three young vets. They are Dr. Sherelle Sami, Dr. Laurel Shand, and Dr. Maurice Frank. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Right, so let's get right into it because I know you all have a lot to say about this topic. But before we get into it, can each of you just say a little bit about yourself and why you decided to become a veterinarian? We'll start with Sherelle.
I've been on your podcast before, so yes. I'll be really brief. I have always wanted to be a veterinarian ever since I was really, really young. I was very much attracted to stray animals, stray dogs, stray cats, stray anything. And I just wanted to save them all. And it just came natural to me. There was a little more story to it, but it has always been my passion and my love and my drive. And I don't see myself doing anything else other than saving lives and fixing things.
All right, great. Dr. Frank?
I always wanted to be a veterinarian since I was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. I always used to say that I wanted to be a vet. To be very honest, I think somewhere along the lines I kind of got a bit murky. And then, of course, because of Trinidadian society, they tell you don't want to be a vet, you want to be a medical doctor. But I think it was in Form 5 or Form 6, I really said that, no, I know that I want to be a vet. So I pursued that career. And then I basically, because I have such a passion for social justice, went more into epidemiology and infectious diseases, so more the public health aspect, but a lot of emphasis on trying to do the best I can for persons who can't afford vet care.
Excellent. I would love to have a deeper conversation with you about that, but let's move on to Dr. Shand. Tell us a little bit about your vet journey.
Okay, mine may not be as exciting. I mean, unlike Sherelle, she was attracted to strays, but strays are attracted to me anywhere I go. A stray finds me and I play with them and feed them and stuff. So, but I've always loved animals ever since I was small. Love the surgical aspect of it, and everything just flowed naturally into the path that I'm in. And I love doing surgeries and fixing things. That's my passion.
Excellent.
Yes, you have two women who really love surgery here. I'll be very honest, the both of them love soft tissue surgery.
Love it.
I like fractures.
Well, yeah, I know you have a big orthopedic, yes.
We also have three vet nerds on this chat, clearly. But just to jump right into the topic, I mean, it actually stems from a post that Dr. Sami made, and I picked up on it a little bit. She sounded a little frustrated about an incident that happened to her that hopefully gives us a little chance to explore the two major issues, and those of sexism and ageism in the veterinary community. So, Dr. Sami, if you could start by telling us about that incident or any other that sticks out to you that really explored that whole issue of sexism in your field of work.
Yes. Now, that particular time that I did that post, I was at my wit's end because it wasn't the first or second time that I was made to feel as though the opinions that I had or the facts or the information that I have was enough. I had someone prior to this incident mention that she found that too many young vets, and I took that as a compliment, because while I am thinking I'm in a midlife crisis, she obviously thought that I was still too young to practice and to work on her pet. Now, her pet did die under my care, which, deepest condolences. Nothing that I touch, my intention is to have pass away on me.
Right.
So
it's supposed to do no harm, right?
Right. So there are a lot of underlying things that are not easily detected, and unfortunately her pet passed away shortly after surgery. Mm-hmm. And in trying to have the conversation with her, where I think things may have gone badly, she did mention that she found that too many young vets, did delicate surgeries unsupervised, which was not true, but I heard her. I allowed her to express her grief. I tried not to take it personal, but I was also grieving with the loss of her pet, and I definitely didn't know how to, at the time, process what had happened. So that time before, my age was considered. Mm-hmm. Now, I work in an all-female clinic, so it's difficult to really ask for a male veterinarian in the facility that I'm in, but you can ask for information and it can go to another vet where you would like a second opinion. And with this particular client, he had made mention, and he was very kind in stating that, he would like a second opinion. His dog had cancer, unfortunately, that I diagnosed through testing. And he politely wanted a senior vet who was also male to re-examine all the things that I've done, all the information that I gave them. I did not give them good news. I understand. But it just hit a spot. And I guess that's ego, or that's how I processed it, because I know I was trying to do my best. And I have a team of wonderful doctors ranging in age, and I can always reach out to other veterinarians for assistance. And we also have information at our tips where I am. We have Veterinary Information Network, that's called VIN. We have information at the tip of our fingers, reliable information. So I always try to do my best, but if I don't know, I state I don't know, but I will definitely find out for you, and I'll definitely give you the best advice and care for your pet. So it did touch a little nerve, because, like I said, it wasn't the first time. It did mention while he was very polite. I had just felt like, when will I be seen as someone that knows, or even if I don't know, I will find out for you, and it is the best that I can do for your pet. And I'm always happy I always tell people that I feel like the type of vet that I am, I really don't mind second opinions, but when there's a connotation or a
suggestion that it's more than just your ability as a vet.
Correct. That's where it touches a little nerve, because I'm happy for you to have information. Leave my age, leave my gender completely out of it.
Yep.
This is just about your pet and what you want to do, and you are in your right to do the best for your pet. Anything else doesn't matter. My age, my gender does not matter and shouldn't matter. At least that's how I felt. So as soon as you saw it, you reached out and you're like, thanks for the inspiration. And I was happy, because it's not something that we discuss, and it's something we do where we suffer silently. And I had just had enough. I had taken someone else telling me I was too young. Now I'm, hearing age and my gender being a factor. And I was like, I just want your pet to be either well or ease of any suffering. That is the baseline of what I want to do,
Gotcha. I see Maurice wants to jump in here. Go right ahead.
Well, I heard that you made a comment about the fact that you were wondering if it was your pride, but I feel in the whole aspect of imposter syndrome, I don't think you have imposter syndrome, at least based on what I know of you since med school onwards for years now. You don't have that. So I think sometimes, and I realize it's something that's deeply embedded in us, especially persons of color. And in the Caribbean, we have this way where we second guess ourselves. And that is even more so when you're a woman of color who has doctor in front of her name, because it's so much more pressure put on you. And I think, sometimes, yes, it's one thing when persons double take on us, because I'll be very honest, whether we like it or not, there will always be ageism. In different fields, there will always be sexism. And we are working to eradicate sexism, but the reality is people are socialized different, so there will still be sexist. But I feel like sometimes like there's no doubt about it when somebody has basically discriminated against you based on your age and your sex. Like I feel like we sometimes don't want to acknowledge it because we're saying, okay, maybe I'm overthinking. But there are times when we know for a fact race may be a factor, age may be a factor, and we shouldn't dismiss it, because even if, let's say, someone may not say something, the way in which it was said, the connotations, the different factors that are involved, it all comes into play. Because I think what's weird, though, is it isn't just you alone. I think most female vets all have this issue where you can be talking and you can be saying, okay, I believe this is the matter with the case. And then for some strange reason, even if a male vet says it, it just has greater authority when a male says it. As if, okay, you know what, this person has testicles. So clearly, I know for a fact this has to be the answer. And I mean, you could have literally showed it to them with YouTube videos, a diagram. You could have explained it fully, but there's just deeply embedded belief that male clinicians somehow are better, like they could be more trustworthy. And I feel like whether we like it or not, that is how many people think. Like they may not always go there and say it. Like nobody's going to admit that, because nobody's going to say openly, I discriminate.
Right.
But they will, however, sometimes err on the side of, oh, is there an older person here? And if there's an older person, they'll want an older male. So there's two things happening right now. One, there's the ageism, so that you want an older clinician. And two, you would sooner want a male, because you have this weird perceived notion that, okay, a male is going to better be able to deal with what you want to deal with right now in terms of your case. And it doesn't even matter sometimes if the woman is older, if she is more experienced, if she has how many surgeries under her belt. It just somehow comes down to, okay, well, this person is a male. And then I think many people don't want to admit that is their internalized bias. So they just kind of say, oh, well, that's not what I meant, but that's exactly what you meant, because why would you want a male vet only to see your case? Like, what is specific about this case that required only a man see it? Even for orthopedic surgery, is it that you're trying to say only a man will be able to repair fractures? So it's weird, but it's just the way we are socialized also with our primary socialization.
It's very weird indeed, especially given the fact that most gynecologists are men. Weird. Dr. Shan, did you have an experience that you would like to share relative to the ageism and sexism question?
Yes. So I'm in a veterinary practice where my boss has been there for almost 30 years. He's a male veterinarian. The vet or just under him is also a male veterinarian who's been there for about 20 years. So what ends up happening is that I've been there 8 years now, and people still be like, you are vet here how long? You now reach? And I'm like, I've been here 8 years. I've even seen your dog, and like they overlook you. Right? And it's kind of disappointing because I do orthopedics a lot now, and there's like, you going to do the surgery? And I'm like, well, I just explained everything in detail. I would expect that I'll be the one doing the surgery. But I've had a guy, he came with a dog. It was a hematoma, did blood work, everything. Before we go to sedate the dog, he's like, he looks me up and down, and I already know what's coming. And he's like, so how long now you graduate? And I'm like, I've been working at this clinic for 7 years now. Why? He's like, oh no, you just look kind of young. And I'm like, thanks for the compliment. But, what does that have to do with me being able to see about or handle the case that I am presented with? All right. Luckily, I do work in a clinic that with my boss and the senior vets that we've had people come in and be like, oh, I just want to see the older male vet. They don't know their name. They don't know who they are. But just because for the mere fact that is an older male vet, that they would prefer to see them. And I'm like, no problem. My boss, usually what he does, he'll bring me back in the room with the client. Because usually they do this after you've explained everything to them in detail, a full examination, everything. So then my boss comes in, re-explains the same thing I went through. And then he's like, well, Dr. Shan will handle the case as we see forward. So he basically tells them, all right, it's the same thing I would have done, hand it back to me. So they realize that, they're put in a position where they can't get their way and they still handled correctly. Sometimes I prefer that my boss takes it over or the other vet, because in the back of my mind, I know they don't trust what I'm doing. And I don't think that's fair to the patient or the client, because then the client will always seem as doubting what you are capable of. And I don't like that feeling, personally, to me. Because then in the back of my mind, I always know, like, they don't trust my opinions. And I don't like clients feeling uncomfortable with their vet. And that's my personal take on it.
But do you think it is a scenario in your case where in that clinical setting, there's not enough equity in terms of all of the doctors who are on staff at this clinic have equal footing, basically, so that when a client comes to you, whether they are a regular client or not, they understand that they are getting the same quality of care regardless of the vet that they see?
Well, that's kind of hard to determine because, we've had clients that just come see anyone and they're fine with the care straight across the board, but there have been clients that have been long-standing clients. So seeing a new vet kind of throws them off a bit. And then I kind of have a baby face, so I understand that there's be like, who's this young, look like they now come out of vet school kind of. And I'm like, so when they start asking those questions, I already know where they're heading. But once I tell them I work in there about 7 years now, they usually like, and watch you a little bit differently, because 8 years of experience is a good bit of experience as well too. Because and at the clinic I'm at, we see a lot of cases, so there's plenty to see in that time. But because of how those two male vets have been there so long, everybody knows of them. So it's always like the go-to when they do come. So what's for you is for you. So I don't run down those clients anyway.
But and any of you could answer this. In terms of practicing in a veterinary clinic, is it more important to develop a relationship with the human rather than at first? I know that a lot of the cases you probably deal with sort of like emergencies. So there's no time to have a conversation with the human client, just on a conversational basic level, just to get to know them. But how important is that relationship in terms of the work that you do and establishing yourself as a professional with that client?
So if I could talk, in my opinion and how I've seen things, that relationship between client and veterinarian is actually very important, because if they don't trust your opinion or trust you as their veterinarian, things will go south very quickly, very badly, and it will blow up exponentially, because you could be doing everything right and it's a complicated case, and if they're not comfortable from the get-go, it's problems. No matter if you did it the perfect way, by the textbook, everything perfectly, they will always find fault. That's why I always tell people that I know, I say, if you find a veterinarian you're comfortable with, stick with them. I've had people be like, oh, here's a vet I could talk. I say, you're comfortable with your veterinarian, stick with them, because once you're comfortable, you will take their advice a lot better than someone you're not familiar with or someone you don't have that rapport with. And I've seen it happen. Like, I've had clients come for second opinions and they just come for something and it's like, okay, this is what's going on. And you try to just make sure that they go back to their veterinarian because they're comfortable with them, just to make sure they feel at ease. Because if they don't feel comfortable, they will never be 100% with you seeing about their patient.
I agree 100% with Dr. Shand. I think the vet-client relationship is very important. I have learned the hard way that if someone does not trust you, or if they are having second thoughts, or if they're having doubts, it goes badly so quickly and so unfortunately. And moving on from those experiences. If you're not comfortable with me, by all means, like Dr. Chan said, be with a vet that you're comfortable with. You will definitely respect, listen, follow through much easier than if you didn't trust your vet.
Okay, so two scenarios come to mind. As someone who has seen a few cases over the years with different types of personalities, I think one of the problems I had is, as they rightfully touched on, where age comes into play, because sometimes you could be accurate. You would have gone in a textbook, you know exactly what it is, and they will just trust that, this person is saying the correct thing because in their mind, this person is older. And what was interesting is, I remember it was an autoimmune disease. I'll never forget this case because it is actually pretty rare. The dog had myasthenia gravis, and the owner took a while to present the dog to any vet, which is a common thing in Trinidad, actually. In many cases, they take a while and it becomes an emergency. It becomes very difficult to manage. And what people don't realize, the more difficult a case becomes to manage, the more costly it becomes, which I think is to be expected. And they didn't have the money, which was understandable. So sometimes I tend to do cases pro bono. But what was difficult is they didn't want to accept the diagnosis because the dog also had a ruptured diaphragm. So they did the diagnostics, and I referred for diagnostics. They saw on the x-ray the dog had a ruptured diaphragm. Some of the abdominal, contents from the stomach area were actually in the lung cavity, so the thoracic cavity. You could see it on x-ray. It was very clear as day, very obvious. We counseled the person. We spoke about their options, what has to be done. And I think anybody who understands myasthenia gravis knows that the outcome is pretty poor. So it's a very lifelong condition. You have to do a lot. And it also means that you actually have to keep your dog upright when they eat. And they didn't want to do that, so the dog kept regurgitating. But what was interesting, the treatment is exorbitant. And then that's another thing that people blame vets for. That's a side note. They say that it's our fault if the treatment is so expensive. But if one pill for let's say any condition, depending on the drug you're using, is like 20 something, 30 something TT dollars, that's beyond my control. Like, I can't control that. But anyway, they were prescribed the pills, and what was odd is I remember they came back to me and they said, they had spoken to an older vet, and this person had said, they can do the surgery. And in my mind, I'm thinking, but and I know that you cannot do the surgery. Like, this is not something you can do. But they trusted fully in the reality that this person has been around for more years than you. So they are far more capable. And what was really grateful to me, this is me now doing all of this work, which is thousands of dollars worth of veterinary work for free. And then you say, basically, I'm going to go by someone else. And then what was hilarious, in this own twisted way, the person did not know it was a pro bono case. So when they found out that the client did not have the money to afford the case, they also outlined, what can we really do if they don't have the money for some diagnostics and surgical? And as I say, like, even when I had to bring it back to the person and say, there's only that much that can be done, when their dog died a few days later, it almost still became you did not do enough. Not that, this was a death sentence from the beginning. It was almost like, you did not do enough. But maybe if I had gone to this person from before. So I think that's the thing, like, it's not only about age, as the fact that I think a few younger vets that I've encountered and went to school with, and even the ones who are all abroad, it's a global thing. They tend to be very compassionate. All vets, most vets are compassionate. They want to do the best for their patient. Hence, we get compassion fatigue. I think the younger ones tend to want to make a difference because sociologically, especially with millennials, we tend to want to make a change in the world. But I think what hurts us the most is when it's almost like it's spat upon. So it's like you make all of this effort and then people just believe, it doesn't really matter. And I think that is what upsets vets, especially young vets, a lot. The way people just seem to disregard all the effort we put into our case.
Yes,
I would
Dr.
say
Sammy.
what I'm learning as I grow more into my career is that I'm learning that when a pet passes away, grief brings out a different side of us that we can't understand. And I have learned that anything said during a time of grief not to be taken personally. I'm now learning this because they have lost a part of their life. That pet would have been a part of their schedule, a part of their mental health, a part of their routine, their life. I always try to see the other side. So having pets myself, I always think, okay, I'm now without my pet. And when you try to go through and process why they're no longer with you, it's sometimes easier to unfortunately blame the veterinarian. And sometimes things happen. Not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying that we are absolute 100% angels. But I think in times of processing that grief, one way to put closure to it is sometimes to pass blame on us. And because at least the vets who try their very, very best, we do take it personal sometimes because we would never want that to be the outcome. So it is a lot to still unbox and learn. And as younger vets, and I'll say younger because we're not in our 50s, I would say.
Yes, you're millennials, as Dr. Frank said.
Yes.
I myself am Gen X, so I can't really relate.
Right. We're still trying to not have that compassion fatigue because we really do try to give our all, and it does wear us down at times. So I think for myself, I'll speak for myself that it is a lot to process and a lot to learn and understand and still give compassion through it all. I think when the situation happened with me, both Laurel and Maurice jumped on the support train, and that's why I wanted the both of them to also share their experiences with me because they understood how I felt, why I felt that way. I think Dr. Shan, as excellent surgeon as she is, will still face challenges like me because she is young as well as a female. And I think Dr. Frank would have, while he is a male, the young part would have affected him, you know? So we are still trying to navigate our way through our career. It is something that we chose and we love, but it's still a lot.
Yes, challenges abound. Before you go, Dr. Frank, just to say that in my experience as a pet owner and visiting vets, I have found that it is actually difficult for me if I am uncomfortable with something to articulate that to the vet. And in fact, I've been in situations where the vet would make a offhand remark that I would consider to be a little dismissive or critical of my pet ownership skills. And I will leave it as is. I wouldn't say anything because in my mind, she, and most of the vets that I've dealt with have been female. She is the doctor here. She knows what she's doing, so that I will defer to their expertise on it. But I guess for other people, it's easier to express themselves to the vet in a way that may not be appropriate. But it's just a matter of how the vets deal with it. And Dr. Sam, you mentioned what you just said, shows that there is at least a measure of camaraderie among vets, and that's useful to know and to have. And what do you all think could be done on a broader scale to improve the level of care that vets receive when they encounter things like this?
I think it's kind of interesting that you both said that because in both instances, you both spoke about internalized biases, because how I speak to you in grief will vary depending on how I perceive you. And, we have to realize that also. So how, for example, a man or anybody, let me not say men only. I think women will also fall within this realm where they will also, whether we want to admit it or not care for a female vet compared to a male vet. So it's not just that men don't care for a female vet. I think women also don't care for a female vet sometimes, depending on the internalized patriarchal structures that she has. But one thing we need to realize is, I just realized you said something, and it's actually very true. You brought up that when your vets were talking, you didn't really feel like you were empowered enough to say this may not be what you're portraying to me, and this is not how you're putting it out. And I think, whether we like it or not, humans approach situations with internalized biases. And whether we like it or not, we're also socialized. And I think it's a whole different sociology discussion for a different day. That's a whole global health and public health discussion about how we have our own structures, because even not to the secondary school you went to, it all indicates how you move throughout society. Whether we want to admit it or not, that is how it is. How you perceive somebody, the car they drive, when they bring their dog, the type of dog that they have, how they dress. That is how I've actually seen where different vets will talk to different clients depending on it. And that's a good thing, because remember, you want to make people feel comfortable. You want to change the environment to meet the person. But it's also a bad thing, because you may find that if you perceive someone based on your own internalized colorism, sexism, all of these different factors, you will actually talk down to them. So I can understand how persons may, vets included, talk down to people and even be sexist themselves and think, okay, let me change how I address a situation based on if it's a male client compared to if it's a female client. I could see how it goes both ways for us at times, because we may not even realize it.
Right.
And I think that's important to know that, we're talking about how we are treated, but sometimes we need to also reflect upon how we have treated our clients, because we need to also have some kind of accountability and responsibility.
Definitely.
And if we're going to address this, I think the only way to address it, honestly, is it has to be an actual targeted approach. Like, you have to make it known we're dealing with a sexism or ageism issue in the profession, and it needs to have messaging and needs to have actual targeted approaches to deal with it. And you have to have everybody on board when you're dealing with it, because you can't just say, whereas we are the females in the clinic, we are the female vets here, we're going to be dealing with it this way. And then the male vets are not on board. Because then, somebody will come and they'll make a joke and be like, oh gosh, how those women are. They always want to cry for something. No, you can't have that, because then you've undermined the movement that is supposed to happen. And if we're doing a movement, it has to be a movement where we're all unified, or most of us are unified, and we're saying, this is the change that we want to make. And we have to also realize social change doesn't take a short space of time. It's obviously going to take a while, but we have to also stick firm to the fact that if it's a female surgeon, this is the vet doing the surgery, and we can't actually have someone now saying, let me reschedule for a male vet. No, there's no reason that you need to reschedule. So I think we need to also push those narratives throughout the clinics, and push those narratives, especially in the vet schools, because whether we like it or not, the majority of the veterinary profession is going to always be women. Like, women make up the majority of the profession, yet it's very hard for them to break this glass ceiling. And that speaks volumes for where we are in terms of how we deal with sexism and how we deal with also gender normative social constructs. Like, we need to look past those to move ahead.
I think what really happened as well too is because a lot of the older heads of vets that people have been used to, if you look across the board, a lot of them have been male. So I think that is what set that standard in some people's heads. So they grew up as children seeing the male vet seeing about the dog. And then sometimes as they get older, it may be embedded in them that, okay, the male older vet may know more because they've known them since they're small, coming up through the ranks. And sometimes, because I've had clients come and be like, oh, I know the boss since I was 5 years old, coming my dog. I was like, okay, cool, yeah. He was like, I could see him. I was like, sure, no problem, that's fine. And my bosses be like, you see him now. Because he have a lot of other things going on as well too. I understand that. But it's like, because they condition that, okay, they so accustomed seeing it, because I'm sure Dr. Frank could tell you too, because he knows a lot of them as well. A lot of those heads are males in Trinidad. And I think that kind of just went down as people got older, that they like to see the male older vets as well. So, but luckily, at least with our years coming down, we have that in terms of, we have a group where we could say, okay, if you have an issue, you have people you could bank on to, sometimes vent about the issues that you do go through, which is actually good, because sometimes you do need that. And if we ever have issues with dealing with cases, you have people you could talk to and refer cases and stuff. I am all about referring things I cannot handle, because I think that is proper medicine. Some people don't like to do that. I still don't understand it. And one point that you touched on in terms of dealing with people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and everything. I try my best to everybody is the same playing field in terms of you could walk to the clinic with your dog, you could have driven in a BMW or come in a helicopter. I will offer everything to you. You tell me what you could manage or not. Everybody gets the same treatment. I explain everything. If you do not understand, I will say, here, what? Okay, you don't understand these terms. Try to bring it down to a level that they can, because everybody deserves a chance to be educated on what is happening with their pets as well too. Because I think that is the best way to get people to understand and be better prepared in the future if things happen again. Right? Because if we don't educate our clients, they would never know what to expect and how to treat and to improve the quality of care they are giving their pets as well too. So I try my best to do that, at least in my job. So at least that way they'll be better equipped in the future as well.
Yes, that is very, very, very important. As a pet owner, I definitely concur with that last statement. The better equipped I can leave the vet clinic, knowing how to care for my animal, and not have to drive to your clinic and pay you thousands of dollars to deal with something that I can manage on my own, the better for everybody involved, really. If there are any final comments any of you have on this or any other subject, now is the time.
I realized the way we kind of came across, it may come across like this is a Trinidad cultural issue, but I just want to point out that it's a global issue. So I think, a vet in the UK who will have access to a CT scan and have access to many different resources to us, she will have this issue. And a vet in the United States, she will have this issue. A young male vet, he will also have these issues because of his age and how he is seen as young. Because I think also, even for me, who's still, okay, I haven't really looked any different in the past decade. So generally it looked the same, no real change. And you still will always, I even remember once a woman asked me how Cape was going. And I said, I'm a grown man. So, you have to realize that, you look young. So the likelihood of people saying, okay, this is who I'm going to trust with clinical judgment, it's really weird to them. And that's how people are seen. That's how they're perceived based on their age. But they'll be like, that's a professional thing. It's not us alone, but I think it's a global thing that even the other day we had the celebration of women in STEM, and up to now in academia, women are still 30%, and that's still not enough. And even in veterinary medicine, women make up the grand majority, but they're not breaking the glass ceiling. We still see in vet schools, in university settings, not just, let's say, in a vet college alone, but just in university settings, women are still victims of sexism, victims of sexual assault, harassment from peers, from lecturers. You still see even in the working world, vets will be literally walking on the corridor and somebody will say, excuse nurse. And there's nothing wrong with being a nurse, but it's also the perception that you cannot be the doctor here. And I think that's across the board, and we need to understand it's not about identifying the issue. We have to make this concerted effort that we're going to change, and we have to be able to stand firm in the fact that it's okay to correct people. I think sometimes we tend to shy away from it, and I think even when I had read Sherelle's post, I got really angry, because I think what struck home for me is I thought to myself, if I was present, I know for a fact I will say something, because everyone who knows me knows I will say something in a situation like that. It's how will I say it? And I think I just realized I would say it in an angry tone, not because I'm angry with the guy or angry with the woman. I'm just angry with the situation on a whole. And I think I'm tired of being angry at the sexism and the ageism and all the different issues that we face. Exactly, because, there's so much prejudice and, it falls down on us as clinicians to now deal with this. And it's the fact that it just takes away from the fact that you can just do medicine. And, people just believe that, what does she know about fractures? But she is actually probably more well equipped to do this surgery than older pair. And that's something that people don't even realize, that by changing the vet or changing the clinician, you're literally changing the standard of care. So I think it just creates this anger. It creates this anger, the fact that it's almost like you did not go to school. It creates this anger, the fact that it's almost like you did not invest in continuous professional development, that you did not invest in textbooks. And I think, we need to channel that anger into change.
Well said. Any final words, Dr. Sean?
I don't think I could outsay anything that Maurice just said,
I know,
because
right?
he said it so well, and I agree 100% with him. It's just that change takes time for us to be seen as equals with our peers as women, and even based on our age, because sometimes you could have more experience and someone with less experience just because it's a male or they look older, they may be more inclined to take their opinion. It is something that culturally is prevalent, and with time we just have to educate and hope that things change for the better.
Yep. And the final word goes to Dr. Sammy.
Well, there's nothing I could say that tops these two. But since the experience happened to me and I voiced it and I sparked your interest, I think it was a discussion for us to have and for us to maybe continue having. Dr. Frank is right. Sometimes we shy away from it. And even you yourself, you stifle how you feel when a vet says something that doesn't agree with your soul. It's time to have uncomfortable conversations where we can, all of us together can grow and change in a respectful manner. You know, there's no need to go straight to Facebook and there's a rant, which the generation now loves to do. And it's expressive. It sparks conversation. It definitely does. But we should have them.
Agreed. And I want to thank the three of you for spending your time and for sharing your thoughts and your expertise with our listeners on Animalia. And I'm sure in some time in the future, maybe we can dedicate an entire episode to each of you singly, so we could talk more about your own specialties in your profession and your particular hopes and dreams for veterinary medicine in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Now, if you're a vet, I hope this conversation was beneficial in understanding the stresses that your colleagues undergo and how they might be solved or at least minimized through open and honest dialogue. And if you're a pet owner that interacts with vets, I hope this conversation helped you to understand how your interactions can sometimes be harmful in terms of the relationship you're supposed to be building with your vet. All they ever want is for your pet to be happy and healthy. So in this case too, dialogue works wonders. This week's Rescue Me is Jeorge with a J, a 7-month-old tabby-colored kitten who's intelligent and lots of fun, neutered and vaccinated. If you're interested in adopting him, call 388-2169. That's 388-2169. And you can see George's adorable face on the Animalia socials. So, I had to stick in this piece of commentary to give my take on the matter involving the horrific killing of a dog in Tobago. So as far as we know, a young man has been arrested and charged with the offense, some of which was captured on video. He was placed on $10,000 bail and will reappear in court next month. Now, apart from the obvious, there are several things wrong with this scenario. The first problem I'm having is with the reporting of the incident in the press. The highlight of the most recent story was the fact that he got bail, but there was no mention of the actual charge laid. And this is important because there are two pieces of legislation that address animal cruelty. But one offense carries a larger fine and prison time than the other. So the reporting has caused some confusion and is misleading people, in my view, into thinking that because he got bail, he might escape punishment, or that he shouldn't have got bail at all. In my view, however, the bail isn't the real issue. What we should be focused on are several other key things. One, the actual charge laid, as I said earlier, then we would know what the punishment is. Two, providing support to the family grieving their lost pet. It doesn't help to say, let him rot in jail, or karma will get him, or any such veiled threat of retribution. Everyone who is concerned about the outcome of this matter should be providing support by attending the court matter if possible and ensuring that the details of the case are accurately and fairly reported. And 3, and this is the controversial bit, instead of prison time, I wonder if the magistrate can impose a community sentence that mandates the offender to volunteer at the TSPCA for no less than a year, taking care of the dogs that live there. Because prison is not going to help him learn the error of his ways, but working with dogs who are in need of rescue will. The magistrate could also throw in that he should donate part of his wages to the shelter, but I suppose if there's a fine, that could be donated to the shelter instead of going to the court. Now that is what justice looks like to me.
It's like a demon in himself, without a care for no one else. It's like a beast among his own, so aloft yet so alone. So powerful and no so strong, but with little compassion. It's like a robot on the run, confused and headed for self-destruction.
And that's the end of episode 3. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll be back in 2 weeks to hear from an amazing person doing their part to advance the cause of animal welfare. Remember to check out the website animaliathepod.com for new episodes, archived episodes, and much more. Search and subscribe to Animalia the Pod on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, for new episodes. And you should also like and follow Animalia the Pod on Facebook and Instagram. And if you'd like to appear on the podcast, send me an email to animaliathepod@gmail.com. I'm Natasha, and until next time, take good care and remember, love off your pets. Bye-bye.
Selfishly we sit awake and plan our sinful mission of bringing the next man down. Friend or foe or either one, needless to mention. With smiling faces we deceive ourselves, replacing dignity with greed and jealousy. Showing true confirmation of man's injustice to man. That's why I say, like a demon in himself, without a care for no one